Alright, response video to that defending champion guy, who was pretty nice, pretty gracious considering my little bit of hostility I threw at him. But, he sort of deserved that because, he was doing the, so what, man? Big deal. Suffering. Who cares? Bullshit. And, I get a little tired. There's a lot of the cliche stuff, and so, yeah, I get it. You basically understand some of it, and that's good. Alright, so the hang-up part really is this idea of being able to separate our intelligence from our, the feeling thing. And that is sort of important because you really can't do philosophy any other way, because feelings really do corrupt evaluations, our emotions. So in a way, we sort of have to do the philosophy thing in a sense by trying to separate ourselves from any personal involvement. So let's talk in the context of, let's say that you weren't a player in the life game. Your penis didn't have a piece, didn't have a little piece running the board anymore. It wasn't in the game anymore. And nothing you really loved or cared about was playing. None of your kids or none of your family or none of your anything that you could be emotionally tied to was in the game. And it was just this game, this thing, this maze thing, where you watched the little creatures run around and chase and use each other, abuse each other, cheat each other, really fuck each other over. Every few decades, drop daisy cutters and torture and do all kinds of nutty, crappy stuff to each other. Real sloppy stuff. And every now and then a little AIDS virus and a little swine flu and a little this and a little that thrown in for fun. Some cholera here and there and some dysentery there and cancer, the usual stuff. Cancer, Alzheimer's, heart disease, just old cranky age stuff, the usual miseries, car accidents, all kinds of shit going on. And you're watching them, and they're just, you realize they're just chasing. I mean, they're just full of desire, like a heroin addict just has desire. He wants, he needs. So they're chasing and chasing. And you also know the context, that the whole thing gets initiated because a cell reproduces itself. Not on purpose, but just, it pops out of the petri dish or whatever. The chemistry just pops out of the test tube and just starts doing the reproducing thing. And it evolves into this whole maze game with these complex sentient organisms. And you also know the context is that the game for the organisms isn't about them being satisfied. That's not what nature wants from them. That's not what the DNA wants for them. Doesn't have any, it only has a role in the game because it's used to manipulate the little creatures. The desire thing, the satisfaction thing they're chasing. It gives them something to chase. It gives them something to keep chasing after. And, but they're really not supposed to be comfortable. They're not supposed to be satisfied because that's not in the interest of the chemistry. The chemistry wants them to kind of work really, really hard. It wants them always on guard. It wants them always ready. It wants them always, planning ahead. So if they have any spare time, it wants to, create some aggravation inside of them that says, I need to go eat, or I need to fuck, or I need to go collect acorns for the winter, or whatever the hell it is. It's going to create an agenda for them. Something to, disrupt their complacency. Because it really doesn't want, it has no incentive to create organisms that are complacent. They're not going to win in the competition. The turtle's not going to win this race. Some kind of neurotic, insane, crazy rabbit's going to win the race. And so, if that's the context, I'm just saying, so there's a couple of the elements. I probably could add a few more rather discouraging elements to that context. But that's the game, okay? It's a pretty crappy race, and you don't have a horse in it, okay? I mean, it's a race where a horse is going to crash, You know a jockey will get a broken neck. You know this all in advance of the race. You don't have any money invested. No one you care about has any money invested. But you have the power to decide whether the race takes place or not. And so that's my argument to you, is that maybe in that context you could see that you'd have to have a good reason to endorse the race. There'd have to be something, you know, what's the explanation? What would justify it in that context? And so my argument about this desire thing is it's very, very tricky, because it really does fuck us up. It really does pervert our capacity to make evaluations, fair evaluations, because it's really easy for us to slide horror into the past. You know, if we experience something and it was really, really awful, well, as long as it's back there is probably that way. As long as it's back there, we're like, okay, cool. If it's sitting in front of us, well, then it's not so cool no more. Then it's pretty horrifying. And so that, again, would be part of this analysis, is you might look at your own life so far, and you might say, well, yeah, you know, I had a couple of really peak moments. You know, but maybe you had some shit happen to you. I mean, maybe you ended up in the hospital for a couple of months with something. Or maybe there's some other horror, and you sure as hell wouldn't want to go through that again. I mean, you know, it would take real money to bribe you, to get you to do that all over again. I mean, if I made the deal with you, said, yeah, okay, you can either be in this perfect, comfortable, neutral place, you know, where you want for nothing, but you also do nothing, or you can go back and play that game again, you know, not knowing what's coming, and relive it all over again. I mean, would you? I mean, was it all that spectacular when you look back at it? Have there been enough peak moments in your life to say, oh, sure, that was great fun? Especially, you know, grammar school and stuff. Oh, yeah, that just kicked ass all over the place. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you know, some people, maybe that works out in their heads. It doesn't work out in mine. But whatever. You know, but that's where we get to this subjective part. And when is it not subjective anymore? When do we get to make some sort of declaration that something is just too outrageous to be acceptable? And that's one of my favorite words, is this word acceptable. Because I would contend, because of our desire, the human animal will just they'll just keep changing the definition of that word acceptable. It really doesn't matter how bad it gets, because they'll keep comparing. Well, it could be worse. We could have 4 broken legs, or 500 broken legs, or we could have a broken leg and an arrow through our head, and you know, a brain-eating worm in our nostril, and you know, they can just keep piling on and keep piling on and figure out some way to say everything's okay, because they'll compare it to something more hideous, more ludicrous, and so they never have. You know, the word unacceptable really doesn't mean anything to a human being. Because they'll never stop something. It'll never be unacceptable. They just keep accepting it as a price for life. I've made the argument that, you know, there could be a war tomorrow and 3 billion people could die really badly, you know, really horrible, and lots of anguish and burning fire and all kinds of horror. And, you know, the survivors should just pick up the next day and say, well, you know, that was bad news, but you know, there's grass to go cut. You know, they'd find an excuse to go back in their little wheel and run their little whatever to nowhere. The perpetual chase for the Fritos they've eaten zillions of times. And I mean, that's the other part of this mazy, gamey thing, is that, you know, none of these creatures, you know, they keep reproducing, so there's always a new generation that has to do all the same re-education crap. They have to learn the same lessons, go through the same bullshit, and you know, all just to watch themselves decompose and rot in the end anyway. And in most cases, not in a very dignified or beautiful manner. There's not too much beauty in the old nursing home. So, you know, this is not... this just isn't some sort of thing you just look at and say, oh yeah, it's so perfect and so beautiful, why the fuck wouldn't I want one of those in my house? Now, this thing comes with a whole bunch of snarly shit, okay, a lot of bad smells and a lot of, you know, I don't know, flying needles, and it's just not a simple, easy answer kind of thing if you're going to take it at all seriously, because there's really something serious happening. You know, all these sentient creatures have been manipulated through evolution, and they're living lives, and they're living hard lives, and they're all chasing, they're all running after this thing we call satisfaction and comfort. They won't get it but for a little moments here and there. They'll have a few moments in the sun, you know, we can lie on their bellies and feel all happy and comfortable, but it's a few moments, a lot of hard work. And so yeah, I'm just saying that's where the question is. It's like I keep using a heroin addict as an example, because most people can look at that person